Former President Trump was found guilty last week on 34 counts of falsifying business records and faces up to 4 years in jail and a $5,000 fine. And I think I speak for all of us when I say you can waive the fine.
Joe Biden must go to prison. That's all I have to say. Hunter Biden must go to prison. Senator Bob Menendez must go to prison. Got to go to prison. These are the new rules. I'm just playing by the rules as they've been laid down by the Democrat Party. Seems only fair. Only fair. Yeah, Joe Biden going to sign an executive order today, which he said he couldn't possibly do because it would have no effect, and it was all the Republicans' fault. He was lying, of course, and the media were lying with him, giving him a tongue bath. They get up and shave their tongues every morning to make their tongue baths more luxurious. He was lying, and now he's going to sign an executive order. It won't do much, but they'll get the headlines out of it because the news media will again shave their tongues and go to work. It's good to be a Democrat. You can be extremely mentally impaired. He rode the bicycle over the weekend. The media couldn't have been more excited. It was just like Chairman Mao swimming the Yangtze River at Wuhan, China. At the age of 73, the world was dazzled. Oh, so robust, comrade workers. Yes, and while he and the Democrats and the media, but I repeat myself, lied that he couldn't do anything, he of course opened the border by executive order. President Trump largely secured the border by executive order. Joe Biden unsecured the border, opened the floodgates, and he did that by executive order. More than 90, it was 94, I believe, executive orders to open the border. So all the gang members and the human traffickers and the sex traffickers and the child sex traffickers could come in. The fentanyl traffickers. So, we could have 100,000 Americans a year die from fatal drug overdoses, largely, but not entirely, fentanyl related, out of China through the cartels in Mexico. Joe Biden is the favorite president the cartels have ever had. Favorite president the communist Chinese have ever had. Xi Jinping. Very excited to have Joe Biden in the White House. Remarkable stuff. And they lie and they lie and they lie. And then they say, it's all the Republicans' fault. No, actually, House Resolution 2 would have solved the problem. But the Lizard King over in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, he put the kibosh on that because he is definitely not on our side. He should go to prison too, don't you think? What crime did he commit, Chris? Really doesn't matter. We'll sort that out later. We're going with the Soviet Joseph Stalin KGB Lavrenti Beria rules that the Democrats have established in the United States of America by way of Donald Trump. And we had James Comey yesterday. That was a remarkable one, wasn't it? James Comey being fluffed over the weekend by the former spokesman for the spokesperson, something for the Biden White House, who instantly became a seven-figure journalist at NBC News. And James Comey, he said, well, what are you going to do to put Donald Trump in prison? You're going to put Donald Trump in prison. And the Democrats working in Congress to remove any Secret Service protection from Donald Trump so that he can be more easily murdered in prison, which is the Democrat Party's plan. The amazing Democrat Party. They are not on our side. They literally want him murdered. They want him killed in prison. They put police officer Derek Chauvin in prison for not murdering St. George Floyd. And he was stabbed 22 times by a Democrat in prison and barely survived that murder attempt, that assassination attempt by the Democrats. And there's still no discussion of letting him out of prison because he didn't really murder George Floyd. George Floyd died of a cardiac failure, according to the coroner. And the coroner said there was no trauma to the neck, no trauma to the trachea, no asphyxiation. It was a heart cardiac death. And if they had found him dead at home in his Barcalounger recliner, they would have determined that it was a drug overdose because of the amount of fentanyl in his system and the amount of methamphetamine in his system. And Congressman Benny Thompson wants to remove Secret Service protection from Donald Trump so that when the Democrats, Juan Merchan in New York, a Biden donor, sends Donald Trump to prison, Congressman Benny Thompson would remove his Secret Service protection, and former FBI Director James Comey, who gave Hillary a free pass and sabotaged President Trump again and again, said, oh, well, we'll put him in prison like this.
They would just put him in a double wide somewhere out near the fence, out in the grass.
That's all.
And he would eat there, he'd shower there, he'd exercise there, he'd be away, as Danya Perry said, from general population, but it's obviously doable.
Yeah, it's obviously, we could definitely put him in prison. That means we can definitely put Joe Biden in a penitentiary. And he would have to have his Secret Service protection denied. And I think you think he'd become a gang leader in prison? You think Joe Biden would become a gang leader? What do you think? I think probably not. Might not fare very well. No Secret Service protection for him in the penitentiary. For what? Well, for, bribing the government of Ukraine and forcing the firing of the nation's prosecutor that was looking into corruption at Burisma. Burisma was paying $1 million a year to the Biden family and also to a friend of the Biden family, Devin Archer. That's fine with our news media, not a problem at all. Speaking of Democrats, I do love this story. Michael Piercy found this. I didn't find this one. The Daily Mail, lesbian dating app. They should use those in prison too. Lesbian dating app to use facial recognition to exclude trans women from matching with biological females. See, the Democrats have dismantled the English language to the point where when they say trans women, they mean men, right? From matching with biological females, which means women. It's biological females. Yeah, I know they're biological females. The word females will do. The word women will do. When they're younger, the word girls will do. You don't have to say biological. We know that. But that's a pretty funny story. At the first dating app for lesbians is set to launch using sex recognition technology to exclude trans women, meaning men, and look for Adam's apples and stuff, and ensure only biological females can sign up. That seems appropriate. I think that's a very good thing. There was a nice woman. We were at our free speech forum the other night at the Birchmere in Alexandria, Virginia, and a very nice group, hundreds and hundreds of people, great listeners to our wonderful radio station, WMAL, and a nice woman who I've met many times before, at least several times before at these events, comes up and she says, I'm your lesbian. And a lovely, a beautiful woman. And so, I'm your lesbian listener. I said, I don't think you're the only one, but a big hug and a picture. And I remind her that everybody loves lesbians, including apparently men dressed as women, which I can understand more than a lot of other things. But there it is. They're going to use facial recognition to determine whether the person submitting the photo is actually a man. Isn't that crazy? It's the brainchild of feminist campaigner Jenny Watson, who says there are currently no dating apps that cater purely to women who want same-sex relationships. Well, that'd be the whole point of a lesbian app, wouldn't it? I mean, come on. How complicated is this? So the facial recognition technology will verify the person is a biological female, meaning a female or a woman. The word biological is superfluous, if I may. I'm not a doctor, but I could be a Supreme Court justice. What did she say? I'm not a biologist. I'm not a biologist. That's what she said. Isn't that amazing? Said that it claims to be 99% accurate, so some might slip through the wire yet. Now, speaking of all that, there was another story that amused me. Well, kind of. It has to do with a racist hate crime felony assault by a racist, and the WNBA, I think, is largely LGBTQ, which means L, because that usually sums it up pretty well. I don't think there are any, I don't know what the other things are. It doesn't matter because L is what counts there. But here is the headline from Fox News. Kennedy, and I'm just warming up now, Kennedy Carter's racist hate crime. And Kennedy Carter, who assaulted Caitlin Clark on the basketball court the other day, now that Caitlin Clark has graduated from college and is playing in the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association, Kennedy Carter has no regrets for foul on Caitlin Clark. "I'm going to compete," she said. She sounded kind of like that. And I found this. Now, why did I marry this story up with the lesbian facial recognition thing? I don't know. And Kennedy, now Kennedy's name is spelled Chennedy. That's her first name. That's why I call her Kennedy, because if I'm going to read the word spelled Chennedy, I'm going to recognize as an English speaker, a native English speaker, that would be pronounced Kennedy. Last name Carter, for example, if it were C-H-A, then it'd be Charter. I know that because that's what they do with yachts and things. Kennedy Carter says she has no regrets for a foul on Caitlin Clark. Quote, "I'm going to compete." Kennedy Carter added she has no complaints about how she and the Sky, that's the Chicago basketball team she plays for, caught flack for the situation. Now, you may have caught this because it made a lot of news. Chicago Sky guard, WNBA, Kennedy Carter, hip check. You could call it that. It was a racist hate crime, a felony assault. She needs to go to prison, don't you think? Like 34 felony counts. Let's find out how we get to 34 felony counts. On Caitlin Clark over the weekend is the hottest topic coming out of the WNBA. That's the only topic coming out of the WNBA, as many have taken sides in the heated debate. Now, it turns out that Kennedy Carter pronounces her name Kennedy Carter, even though it's spelled C-H. And I was like, well, is that true? Is that accurate? So we went to some of the sports broadcasts and listened to the way that they pronounced Kennedy Carter. And again and again on, that's the whole point of the thing. And again and again on ESPN and on network news broadcasts, they pronounce her name and they pronounce it Kennedy because they don't care how it's spelled. They say, and if you go to her Wikipedia page, they say it's pronounced K-E-N, the Kennedy Carter. That's the whole point of the thing. And so it's spelled Kennedy, but it's pronounced.
The fallout from Saturday's flagrant foul of Caitlin Clark continues. We finally hear from Kennedy Carter, the player who shoved Clark,
and so it's spelled Kennedy Carter, but it's pronounced Kennedy Carter. You better not pronounce it any other way, otherwise she might launch racist hate crime against you or your daughter.
To the WNBA, where Chicago Sky's Kennedy Carter is facing criticism for
Kennedy, but it's spelled Kennedy Carter. I don't understand. Now, when I saw that happening again and again, I said, well, that's kind of wacky. Why you just spell it whatever way you want and pronounce it whatever way you want? That's ridiculous. This is the English language. There are rules regarding the use of the English language. And it reminded me of Monty Python, the old Monty Python's Flying Circus, when they had a character on being interviewed with a big polystyrene nose, a big long nose. And he said, well, if you looked at the paperwork, his name was, you'd think, pronounced one way, but he said he pronounced it another way.
Raymond Luxury Yacht.
That's not my name.
I'm sorry, Raymond Luxury Yacht.
No, it's spelt Raymond Luxury Yacht, but it's pronounced Throat Wobbler Mangrove.
You're a very silly man, and I'm not going to interview you.
Well, you see, there you go. And I'd be the same way with Kennedy Carter. I'd say, well, listen, your name is spelled Kennedy. You can't just tell me to pronounce it whatever way. So I think I might call her Luxury Yacht Carter from now on because, what the hell? The English language, the Democrat Party has dismantled the English language to the point where it's unrecognizable in Democrat Party circles. But thanks, Kennedy, for your racist hate crime on the WNBA court. I don't know why it's just that it's the Democrat Party. They're mentally unwell. I said at the beginning of this radio broadcast that by the end of this radio broadcast, you must recognize, if your brain works, that the Democrat Party is mentally unwell. This is just one more small example. Luxury Yacht. It's spelled Luxury Yacht, but it's pronounced throat wobbler mangrove. See? You know, this June marks 2 years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Remember, the Democrats said it would end abortion in America, which they love so much. But it's now been reported that the number of abortions actually increased the following year. Reports say that in 2023, the number of abortions reached its highest level since 2012, more than a decade. So again, everything they said was a lie. And with the abortion pill accounting for 64% of all abortions, tragic, no surprise, however. Now, a great organization, Preborn continues to stand strong for women in crisis and at-risk babies. Preborn is a ministry of compassion that showers women and babies with God's love, provides free ultrasounds to mothers with unplanned pregnancies. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears the baby's heartbeat, it typically doubles the chance that the baby will live a long and happy and prosperous life. $28 sponsors one ultrasound with Preborn. $140 helps rescue 5 unborn babies. Your generous tax donations or other tax-deductible donations will also help to provide women who choose life with assistance for them and their babies for up to 2 years after the little baby's born and happy and clenching their little fists. So please, give your best gift. Give the best that you can. To donate, all you have to do is go to your phone and dial pound 250. And when prompted, say the keyword baby. That's pound 250. The keyword is baby. Or go online to preborn.com/plant. That's preborn.com/PLANTE. That's me. Yeah, I like the English language. I think we should maintain the English language. Language is culture. Dismantling language is to dismantle culture. And the left is actively engaged in that effort. I am pushing back on that. Thank you very much. All right, we're back. The crazy bucket is spilling all over today and pretty much every day, thanks to who, Michael?
The Democrats.
The Democrats is absolutely right. 3 hours a day is not nearly enough, and then I go to Newsmax for a 4th hour every day, and still there is more. Completely crazy. Listen, coming up, I'm going to have Brent Bozell, the great Brent Bozell of the Media Research Center, joining me here on the radio. Brent Bozell III, Media Research Center and Newsbusters. Been battling the loons for longer than I have, and his son became a target of the left-wing mob. Brent Bozell coming up next. All right, we have returned, and on the line we have the great Brent Bozell of the Media Research Center and Newsbusters and so many other great projects. Brent Bozell, Leo Brent Bozell the fourth, and his son was present on Capitol Hill on January 6th, several years ago now, and was recently tried and convicted. And on the line, Brent Bozell the third. Brent, thank you for being with us. Thank you very much.
Chris, thank you for having me. There are things that need to be said.
There are things that need to be said, and there are things that need to be heard, and I need to hear them. And I'm very happy that you could make the time to be here. Now, tell me how this happened. Your son, the fourth, you are the third, and your son, Brent Bozell the fourth, sentenced to about 4 years in prison for his role on January 6th. Now, you may not have been listening yesterday, but yesterday I pointed out that this past weekend was the 4th anniversary of the 3-day siege of the White House, where the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and his family were forced to be evacuated by the Secret Service to the underground bunker where 160 to 180 police officers were injured, where they set fire to the church of the President, St. John's Church, and nobody was sentenced to anything, not a single person for any of that. But tell me about your personal story, your family story.
Okay, so I've remained silent since that date because of my son, because he was going to have to go through a judicial process in the United States that has proven itself no longer to be fair and no longer to be just, and to be weaponized and used against conservatives. His trial is over now. His sentencing is over. So now I speak out. Background: my son has never participated in anything political in his life. He doesn't belong to any organization. I should backtrack first. Chris, you've been in my home. Mm-hmm. You know my family. You know the values that my family have.
I do.
Okay. So he didn't participate in any organization. His only participation in the 2020 campaign was to belong to a prayer group in his local town where they said a rosary daily for America. He was one of the tens of millions, the majority of Republicans, who on the election day believed they'd been stolen. He also believes that is the greatest fundamental gift given to an American, the right to vote. So on January 6th, he came, along with 100,000 people, to the Trump rally. Now, some of them got off the trail and went to the Capitol. He was one of them. He was one who broke 2 windows entering the Capitol. He entered the Capitol, he walked around, he left. He didn't do anything more than that. He was identified because he was wearing his daughter's, he's the coach for his little girl's soccer team or basketball team, and he was wearing their school sweatshirt on there. So there was no disguise when he entered. He was identified by the left. They saw his last name. They did a victory lap dance, and they doxed him. And people were sent to his home, and reporters, and they would put pressure on his job to fire him, on the school to get rid of his girls. It went on and on, the pressure that was put on him. He suggested to an attorney, maybe I should just turn myself in. And just because I'm going to be arrested for this. The attorney said, no, you got to go through the process. Well, the process was 7 o'clock in the morning, knock on the door, and Roger Stone style, in they come. A half a dozen police and FBI agents with long arms and everything, and arrest him. Okay, that is the arrest point. It goes a few months, and they come in with a plea deal that they offer him. They have charged him now with breaking 2 windows, with all these ancillary crimes of entering the Capitol, and the big one, obstruction. Obstruction is what distinguishes January 6th from everything else. If you take away the obstruction charge, then what you're left is, except for broken 2 windows, but for anybody who entered, you've got a situation no different than Code Pink entering the Capitol, no different than pro-Hamas demonstrators in the last couple of months entering the Capitol. It's no different. And in all their cases, people arrested were given misdemeanors and charged $45 or something, and that was the end of it. That's all January 6th would have been for the vast majority of them. So they offered him a plea deal. They would give him between 3 and 4 years in prison if he pled guilty to everything, including the obstruction charge. He said no, because he knows that the obstruction charge is going to be overturned by the Supreme Court. So that was that, but I suggested to him, and I've suggested many times, the feds were not going to leave it there. There's no way they could leave it there. There's no way they could leave the field open where it would only be misdemeanors on January 6th for anyone who entered. I told my son, watch, something more is going to happen. Sure enough, on the eve of his trial, 2.5 years later, and I want to stop here for a second, and I want to go back. You mentioned what went on with Trump. How about the BLM riots in the summer of 2020, causing $1.2 billion in damage, torching Seattle, Minneapolis, Portland, New York, St. Louis, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. You had literally hundreds of thousands of crimes that were committed with the exception of one or two. All those Molotov cocktails that were sent, all those rocks that were thrown, the dozens of police that were injured, the $1.2 billion in damage, the highest in history, all of it was papered over. But on the eve of of my son's trial, they came in with the big one, assault on a policeman. When we heard this charge, our jaws dropped. Why? The Bozell family has nothing but respect for the police in America. How in the world could they do it? Well, we saw the evidence. And Chris, I invite anyone who can possibly find access to this to look at this evidence, and they will not disagree with me. No one listening to your show will disagree with me. You see grainy footage of my son up on one of the decks outside the Capitol, standing next to a police officer with whom he's been speaking. They're looking over the ledge. To his left is a steps leading up to it. On those steps, protesters are gathering. When they reach a critical size where they've completely jammed the steps, somebody yells something, and they all push forward. As they push forward, who's at the top of the stairs but my son, standing next to the policeman, who's pushed from behind and goes toward the policeman. Now, at trial, his judge, and I've got to say, Judge John Bates is a good man and a judicious judge, and I don't harbor any ill will against him. I disagree with the verdict, but he's a just man. But during the trial, the judge himself at sentencing pointed out that there is no conclusive evidence that my son even touched the police officer. And I repeat that he even touched the police officer. However, you learn that assault doesn't necessarily mean attack. It means impede or interfere. And here the Justice Department has said, the prosecutor said he had barreled into the police. No such thing had happened. And then the judge found something that was absolutely remarkable. At sentencing, he pointed out to the prosecution something that, unfortunately, my son's defense team missed, which was that buried in a footnote in the voluminous report from the prosecution was the price of one of the two windows that was broken. $847. Mm-hmm. Chris, that wasn't a felony. That was a misdemeanor. They knew all along it was a misdemeanor. They invented a crime which they attached to my son. They invented a crime of felony. And the judge himself called them out. He offered a mistrial on that one charge immediately because of what they'd done.
Well, let me tell you, I went looking this morning doing research, and ABC News and a variety of other places for the story and for the video. And ABC News, for example, click on the story, oops, page unavailable. This page either does not exist or is currently unavailable. And I found that again and again because the left tampers with the algorithms on these matters as well. And, you know, the New York Times is loving it, but they're not going to give you a fair shake, are they? Nor is the Washington Post, because the left is a lynch mob.
No, and here's the other footage that they didn't have. Where footage is concerned, the Justice Department, with its multi-billion-dollar annual budget, has spared no expense. They have access to 45,000 hours of footage, and you can bet your bottom dollar they've looked at it frame by frame by frame to find this footage. They had to have done that. The defense has been allowed only 14,000 hours, and only an attorney can look for it. So if you got an attorney and you're paying them $500 an hour to look for 14,000 hours, that's $7 million in research that you have to pay. That's the disadvantage that the defense was at this whole time. But had the Justice Department been honest about this, they would have seen other footage, and they did see other footage. There's footage of a policeman who was knocked over by a door, and my son helped him up. There is footage that was shown at the trial of a policeman who's been tear gassed, and no one came to his aid. except for my son, who brought him water. There is footage that was shown at the trial of a semicircle of people that are around a policeman inside the Capitol. It's a herring thought video. It's shot from above. And on the far right-hand side of the video, there's a protester with a baseball bat in his backpack. He goes to pull it out. The policeman sees him, orders him, you can tell by the body gestures, orders him to put it away. The protester pays no attention to him. Suddenly, my son comes from the other end of the room, travels across, gets in the guy's face, and commands him to put it away. The person puts it away. None of that, Chris, none of that mattered to the prosecution. They only wanted that grainy evidence of my son moving toward the policeman, and with that, they got him assaulted. They wanted him remanded on the spot to a federal penitentiary for this. Now, why did they do this, Chris? Uh-huh. Why did they invent a crime? Oh, I'm sorry. We're not done. We're not done. Here comes the big one. On the eve of his sentencing, the Justice Department came up with a new one. They wanted the judge to attach a terrorism enhancement charge to all of this, which would make my son, whose greatest crime in 44 years is a traffic ticket, would make him no different than Osama bin Laden in the eyes of the Biden Justice Department.
Now, who is prosecuting this case?
Some Biden prosecutor. I don't know her name. But whoever it was, she's clearly answering to the Justice Department.
Now, I'm just the D.C. is kind of a funny place when it comes to this, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. is occupied by a left-wing radical, Graves, who is Matthew Michael Graves, I believe his name. And this is a guy who does not prosecute 67% of people arrested in Washington, D.C. for crimes. In 2022, 72% of misdemeanors not prosecuted, 53% of felonies not prosecuted. The crime rate in the city of Washington is through the roof. Pro-crime leftist Matthew Graves, U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C., where they allow criminals to run free and good men die like dogs. And where is your son right now?
He's waiting to be sent to prison. He's got a report as soon as he's told to report. So he's saying goodbye to his family, and who knows when it'll be sometime soon. Now, having said that, he's appealed the sentence, and so who knows where all this is going to go. At this point, I have no faith in our judicial system. One other point to make on all this, going back to the 2020. By the way, the judge threw out the enhancement thing immediately, the terrorism enhancement thing. It was thrown out immediately. But this goes to show the mindset of the Justice Department. This is the same Justice Department, by the way, judicial system, where after the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots of 2020, rioters in New York sued the city for arresting them for rioting.
Right.
And the city agreed to a $13 million you can't make this stuff up, payout to the rioters. And other cities are now negotiating settlements, and I believe Washington, D.C. is one of them.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, Brent, I became aware of this, and of course I followed it the day that it happened, and I know you were being, or you were in the midst of the family crisis, and I didn't want to jump on you right away, but I'm traumatized by what's happened, and I have met your son, and I know your family, and Norma, your wonderful wife, and I have been to your home, and it's such a great family, and everything you do is so great. But if this, and again, and I know your son broke a window and possibly two windows, and you are very disapproving of that, and I've heard you say it, that he should not have done that, but he's being singled out because of who you are. He's being singled out because of your name and because of his name and his association with your activities over the years. And that seems abundantly clear. That seems entirely obvious. And you said something a moment ago, I have no faith in our judicial system. And that is a horrifying thing to hear from Brent Bozell. in the United States of America. We're in a terrible, horrible place when Brent Bozell, and look, I'm there with you. I no longer have faith in our judicial system or in the FBI or in the Justice Department and in prosecutors in Washington, D.C., like this lefty who doesn't prosecute actual crimes but does persecute political crimes. And I'm appalled by all of it. And Brent, I want to stay in touch with you on this, and I would appreciate it if you'd stay in touch with me on this. And I'm very grateful that you agreed to call in today to talk about this. It's something everyone needs to pay close attention to. Our republic is in danger, in jeopardy. Brent, a quick final thought.
Well, you're a dear friend, and I think at the end of the day, what is happening is that anyone who is supporting Donald Trump is going to be singled out. If you are the basket of deplorables and they can put you in prison, they will.
That is where we are. Brent Bozell, God bless, and please keep me in the loop and in the know on this, because this is important, and not just as a symbol, but certainly as a symbol of what's happening to our justice system in the United States of America. I'm appalled. I'm horrified. God bless you, and Norman, your entire family, and thank you for calling in. Brent Bozell of the Media Research Center and Newsbusters, and doing such great work for so long, the left targeting his family. These are dangerous times we're in. Thank you, Brent. The great Brent Bozell, the great Media Research Center, corrupt justice system with political targets like in a third world country, a banana republic. And Brent has said it. His son, 44 years old, father, husband, wonderful person, family man, religious man. He got spun up that day and ought to be held to account for anything that he did wrong that day, and Brent agrees with that. But what has been done here is something else altogether in the two-tiered system of justice. Hey, we've got Hunter Biden in court coming up. We've got the Felonious 51, the letter signed by the crooked intelligence officials tampering in our presidential election, coming up as well.